All right, everybody, good late morning or early afternoon for some of you. And we're going to continue on looking at these defensive end free agents. And the first video this morning was obviously the superstar level free agents. This video is going to be a little bit lower than that. We're still going to be looking at some really nice players here, some really nice pieces that the Seahawks should consider looking at if they, say, lose Leonard Williams in free agency and decide they don't want to break the bank on a defensive end in their defense. These would be like the next level. These are high-end starters. These are really good players, good quality. You're not going to be upset about having these guys on your team, but it's definitely something that you should look at if you just decide we can't go where Leonard Williams wants to go. Because at this point, Leonard Williams might be asking for like 18 mil a year because the cap went up. Maybe 20 million a year. I don't know. And if you decide you just can't do that, these guys should be, in some cases, significantly less, but at least a little bit less. And you're still getting really good play. And it's a good way to address the need without breaking the bank the way the players in the first video this morning would. So if we retain Leonard Williams, which most people expect to happen, then these guys are probably going to be off the table. I don't think you could make it work. You've still got a lot of money invested in Dre'Mont Jones. So you're going to spend big money on a defensive end to rotate in off the bench? Probably not. You're probably not going to do that. So this is like you lose Leonard Williams and you want to save a little bit of money. So first guy we're going to look at in this video will be a guy who's been a really solid player for some time now on the Bengals, DJ Reader. So DJ Reader's been in the league for quite some time. He is coming off a year where he missed a decent chunk of games, but he's only going to turn 30 in July, so he's not that old yet. He is a little bit bigger than the typical 3-4 end, but that's not necessarily a problem for him, I feel like, the way that he plays and the way that he does things. He's not somebody who racks up monster stats the way that a Chris Jones does, but he is a very solid player. Just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, in his career, he has 9.5 sacks. Chris Jones has more sacks than that last season alone. And this guy's been in the league 8 years, but he's actually played defensive end in a 3-4 before, way back when he was in Houston. And for the Bengals, he typically lines up as the 3-tech over the in the DT role. So I do think that he wouldn't, he might be able to play some snaps at nose tackle, which is an added bonus, but I do view him as a 3-4 end if he was in a 3-4 defense. So you're not going to get monster individual production, but you're going to get a good player. PFF has been very effusive in praising him over the last few years. They gave him really good grades last year. They gave him a really good grade the year before. You go back to 2021, I believe the grade was very good as well, and hopefully PFF eventually loads, so I'm proven correct. Yes. So he's a guy who has missed a decent chunk of playing time over the last few years because of injuries, so that's a little bit of a red flag. And I do think it might be a little bit of a red flag that he's been in 4-3 defenses almost exclusively over the last 4 years because he's been on the Bengals. But I believe that he can do it, and I believe that he's a very good player. Obviously, a lower level than a Chris Jones or a Christian Wilkins, but you're going to be spending a little bit less money. Spotrac has him at about 15 mil a year, a little bit under the 15 mil a year. So 3 years, 45 million for DJ Reader. That should be a little bit less than Leonard Williams is going to get. Now, the cap went up. Maybe he gets 16, but it's still going to be a little less than Leonard. So if that's the route you decide to go, DJ Reader makes sense as a reasonably priced option to give you a starting caliber defensive end across from Dre'Mont Jones. So he would be near the top of the list here. The next guy that I want to evaluate here would be Sheldon Rankins. So Sheldon Rankins, about to turn 30, just like DJ Reader was. And this is a guy who should slot in very nicely as a 3-4 end with his size, with his rough physical profile. Now, he hasn't been doing it for quite some time. He's been in a 4-3 most of his career. But I think that the skills that he has should translate very well to playing 4-eye technique. And this is a guy who's seen good production as a pass rusher unlike someone like a DJ Reed, who is more of a space eater. He's got a 8-sack season back in 2018, and in 2023 for the Texans, he had a 6-sack season. So this guy has been a pretty productive pass rusher throughout his career. Excuse me. And he's probably just coming out of his prime, but he should continue to be a quality starter for at least a few more years, especially because he is just coming off a year where he had more sacks than he had in quite some time. Now, there are some warning flags on PFF here. They, generally speaking, do not think highly of his run defense. They think he's a pretty good player overall, and it's not always the case, but you go back through his PFF grades, and even the seasons where he overall played good, the run defense grades tend to be a little bit on the lower side. So I do think there's some red flags here, which is why you're going to be able to get him for even less than you get DJ Reed. So again, this is like a little bit of a budget option, and Spotrac reflects that by thinking he's not even going to get 8 figures a year. They do have him at 9.9, which is basically that, and the cap going up might see him get like 10.5 or 11, but the point is, you are probably going to have to give this guy a little more than half what you're going to have to give Leonard Williams. You're going to give this guy half what you would give Christian Wilkins. And if this first year with Mike McDonald and this new coaching staff sees the Seahawks decide we're not going to take the plunge yet, we're just going to try to get good guys and proof of concept this before we really commit to it with the big swings, then Sheldon Rankins is a guy who makes some sense. Now, they do think he's going to get a 3-year deal, so 3 years, basically $30 million, and there is a little bit of a commitment you'd probably have to make there to at least 2 years before you can move off of him. But I don't think that would be a capital offense of any kind. Again, he is just turning 30, so age is not something that I'm really alarmed about yet. And in 2 years, it probably will be. So you get a 3-year deal done, you move on after 2, it should work out fairly well for you. So Sheldon Rankins would be a quality option for significantly less money than the top dogs. Next guy, this guy's getting up there in years, but he is playing at a phenomenally high level over these last several years and is coming off a fantastic year for the Tennessee Titans. It's Denico Autry. And this guy's been awesome. And he's very familiar playing in a 3-4 because that's what they did in Tennessee when he was there. These last 3 years, he's been an absolute monster playing on that line in that 3-4. And I think this could be just the kind of thing that the Seahawks look at if they want to do something a little more short-term and temporary while they solve the bigger issues while they try to resolve the bigger issues of finding out if what they have can work on a high level. So over the last 3 years on the Tennessee Titans, he has 28.5 sacks. So this is a guy who gets after the quarterback, very productive as a pass rusher. And that is a level of production you very rarely see from even really good 3-4 ends. You can see that his size is roughly commensurate with what we had in Shelby Harris and is not that different from what we have in Draymond Jones. So he's just about the right profile, I think. He is going to turn 34 before the season starts. Therein lies the potential problem with Denico Autry. He's getting old. And to a certain extent, coming off these monster seasons that he had, it kind of feels like you might end up holding a bag if you pay him now. Like, these last 3 years have been him building up to get that big contract because they were some of the best seasons he ever had, and now he's looking for a team to hold the bag as he turns 34. So I am wary of it, but he's been way too good. Like, I don't think he's just going to suddenly completely fall off a cliff. It's probably going to be something a little more gradual, and because he is old, you can probably get away with a little bit more in his contract negotiations. Also, for what it's worth, PFF, kind of like with Sheldon Rankins, does have a little bit of some warning signs here, but it's not as bad. If you go back to 2022, the overall grade was really good. And while there are some indications here that he's not a great run defender, what you are getting in terms of pass rush makes it more than worth it, I believe. By the way, I know they have him listed as an edge, but he wouldn't play edge here, right? He's I don't even know why they have him listed as an edge so much when he's 285. I mean, we tried that with Draymond last year, and we saw that it's just not really something that's very tenable. So I do believe that if he came here, he would play on the defensive line full time. and I think he would be really good at it. Again, like with Sheldon Rankins, there are concerns, but this is a very good player coming off a very good season, and you might be able to get him on a 2-year deal because he's old. So if you could get him for like 2 years, 20 million, or 2 years, even 22 million, that probably gives you the flexibility to easily move off of him after 1 year. So you pull him in with the proof of concept idea, and then if things go well, you can say, okay, let's do something bigger and better next year with somebody with a little more upside, somebody who's going to have more years left in his career. I could see it. I could see it. And the final guy I want to look at in this video would be Grover Stewart. He's been a defensive tackle for the Colts for a little bit now. Little bit on the bigger side, little bit more of a 4-3 guy, but I think he could do the 4-3 thing if you wanted him to. He's indicated some ability to be able to get off of blocks and make plays. A couple years ago, 2022, he had 4 sacks and 70 tackles, so he did prove himself to be a little bit of a playmaker. Last year, not so much. He only played in the 11 games, but this has been a really quality piece of the Colts defense for a while now, and now he's shaking free. The production is not high enough for him to be demanding a big-time contract. By the way, he is going to be turning 31 in October, so age is starting to become a little bit of a factor here, but not a crushing one. PFF has generally been pretty positive on him. They gave him good grades for his play last year. They gave him good grades for his play the year before. Definitely more of a guy who takes up space and makes life easier for the guys behind him than a guy who makes plays for himself. But there's certainly nothing wrong with that. Dre'Mont Jones is kind of here to be more of the playmaking type. That's why he's here, and that's typically what he does. So if you get a guy like Grover Stewart to kind of provide a yin to the yang, that might work very well. And I think that this is a guy, because he's coming off a not great season, maybe you could do a 2-year deal for like 20 million. Maybe it'd be like 3 for 30 or even 3 for 27. But I don't think you'd have to break the bank for him. I don't think he would cost too much more than a guy like Sheldon Rankins. I think that the Denico Autry age issue makes it about equivalent here, and that is significantly less than you would pay a guy like Leonard Williams. So this is a totally viable option here. This is a quality player that doesn't have the individual statistics and individual accolades to demand a monster contract, I don't think, but perfectly viable. So those would be my high-end starter types of the 2024 free agency period at the position. You get those guys, you're going to start them opposite Dre'Mont Jones. You're going to be fairly happy, but you're not going to be blown away. And maybe this isn't the offseason to get somebody that blows you away anyway, but this would do. I think these guys would all do fairly well, and all these guys would leave us feeling like we got pretty decent value for whatever the contracts end up being. All right, so we're going to go into the next layer in the next video. We're going to take a look at some guys who are a little more maybe risky, a little more potential bust, a little more low upside, but guys who you might pull in for depth if you can secure them for a relatively cheap rate. But let me know what you think about this crop. Let me know if anything here stands out to you. I will see you guys soon. Go Hawks, and those are my high-end starters of this cycle.